Terry, as we look at New York's designated hitter situation, explain to us why Darin Ruf is still in the mix.
Well, the Mets feel correctly that they have until the end of spring training at least to make a decision on Ruf. They're right about that. That's not great for Ruf, who I'm sure would love to move on to a place that has more potential at bats for him. But that's the situation. And when you look at it, I know they brought in Tommy Pham, but it's pretty clear that Ruf has the better history for the exact role that both of them could fit, that platoon DH against lefties. I like the Pham signing. He does a lot of things for a team off the bench. But the facts are, as you can see right here clearly, and if you did a deeper dive, it would become even more clear that the only thing really working against Darin Ruf in terms of having that job is A, his performance in a tiny sample size over the 2 months after the trade deadline in New York last year, and B, and maybe this is more significant, the fact that he's become kind of a boogeyman for the fan base who's fixated on how much they don't want to see Darin Ruf coming back. Understandable to a degree given what they saw from him in a Met uniform, but really, he's historically better than Pham at the very thing that they would both be supposed to do for the team.
You know, I think the thing on that, too, if you're in the front office, you made this trade, you don't... It hasn't worked out yet so far, right? J.D. Davis, he gave up prospects for him, and you're hoping that that was just a small sample, that Ruf struggled, and that he comes back with a winter away and he's adjusted to New York. Not everybody adjusts to New York right out of the gate, especially after being traded, all these things that you're hoping for, but you have a backup. Pham's a backup, you know, for this in the case that Ruf doesn't swing the bat well. And I will say this, if they were to move on with Ruf and Pham was the guy, you could also look at another guy eventually that could end up being there, and that's Escobar. If you want to get Beatty at bats, Escobar hits lefties really well in his career, too. So if Pham doesn't work out, they've got another guy because you get at bats for Beatty, too. So I think they're covered in this spot. I think the days for Ruf are numbered. But if you're in the front office after making this trade, you're like, man, I want this thing to work out. I
have
no
a good
spring.
about that.
Hopefully the manager will sprinkle some fairy dust on him and make him better, hopefully. And, you know, at the end of the day, though, they have some other guys that you can put in there.
Well, as Andy referenced, that's part of the deal here. I mean, they did make a trade for him. They gave up J.D. Davis, and he didn't produce. So, as Andy said, that's kind of the boogeyman factor here for Darin Ruf in New York. But, Terry, let's start with the always big if. But if everyone is healthy, what does your ideal Mets lineup look like next year?
Well, the one thing we know they have is some depth, and that's going to make a difference. So, and I think, you know, when you write a lineup, you got to say, hey, look, and you only worry about tomorrow. I mean, you can't look down the road. So, for me, the lineup on opening day against Santiago Alcantara is going to be Brandon Nimmo leading off. I think he's one of the premier leadoff hitters in the game. Starling Marte fits a great role, hitting second. Again, the speed guy. He's got some power. He puts the ball in play. Francisco Lindor will hit third. Pete Alonso is going to be in a position to drive runs. And I'm going to move Jeff McNeil to 5. I think that bat, you got the reigning batting champion hitting in the 5th spot behind Pete Alonso. I think that'll protect him. Against a right-hander, you're going to have Vogelbach as the DH hitting 6th. Mark Canha, who I think is a very, very, very good player, hitting 7th. Then you've got a switch hitter, again, another left-handed bat hitting 8th, and Escobar in a 9th spot. Again, again, we'll see what happens. But if Max Scherzer opens, I think Neves is probably going to hit in another left-handed bat hitting 9th.
Well, I'll say this, too, for Terry. That must have been an absolute joy to put together a lineup yourself without having to hear one thing from a front office and just to write it and not get any feedback on it. But having said that, I want to say one more thing about the DH spot. I know, obviously, they're projecting to have Vogelbach in the lineup on opening day because facing a right-handed pitcher. But I would not expect the first time the Mets face a lefty for Francisco Alvarez to be anywhere in that equation. I know that's the guy that a lot of people want to hear about, but as we were talking about before with Pham and Ruf, those are the guys right now. And Alvarez, as we've said before, and it still remains true, is not in the mix to be that platoon DH. The Mets just want him to continue to learn how to catch, want him to get at-bats every day. He'll get DH at-bats for the Mets at some point this year, most likely. But on day 2 or 3, when you're facing a lefty, he's not the guy in that lineup subbing in for Vogelbach.